My name is Ben Furness. I'm the Executive Director of the 2030 Project, university-wide climate initiative based out of the Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability. Really happy to be here today and to introduce a really special guest speaker for this class. Andy Hoffman is the Holcim Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the University of Michigan. He holds joint appointments in the Stephen M. Ross School of Business and the School for the Environment and Sustainability. He's also currently visiting climate fellow at the Institute for the Study of Business and Global Society at Harvard Business School. His research uses organizational behavior models and theories to understand the cultural and institutional aspects of environmental issues for organizations. He's written many books and articles, 2 books in particular, that have been quite influential to me personally and to some others is The Engaged Scholar, Expanding the Impact of Academic Research in Today's World, and Finding Purpose, Environmental Stewardship as a Personal Calling. He's also just a very thoughtful and interesting person from the time we've had today so far. So Andy, really appreciate you being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, can you hear me okay? Is the mic going? Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually drove down from Cambridge in the middle of a snowstorm. So that wasn't terribly nice, but now it's 57 degrees. So thank God for climate change, right? I'm gonna start with a joke. You guys are sitting here, I wanna get your attention. So the joke is this. I'm looking at this classroom and it reminds me of a class at the University of Michigan. Although one at the University of Michigan is much bigger, it has about 500 students in it, and no one likes to teach it because you get no personal contact with the students, just a sea of anonymous faces. But there's this one professor who signs up to teach this course every year because it allows him to indulge, let's say, his sadistic tendencies and scare the bejesus out of these young, impressionable undergraduates. And so he's teaching the course one year, and the treatment's working very well. The students are scared stiff of this professor. And in fact, there's one student that's terrified of this professor. The treatment's working really well. He sits in the very last row. He never raises his hand. He never asks a question. You would never know he was there. Comes time for the final. The student studies all night. He comes in. The professor hands out the blue book, sits down in the front of the classroom, says this exam begins promptly at 10. It ends promptly at 12. At 12 o'clock, I'm walking out of the room. And he sits down and the exam begins and everyone's working feverishly, and 12 o'clock comes and he's got a stack of exams. He's about to walk out and he realizes one student still in the audience. It's the student that's scared stiff of him. So he's about to leave, but he thinks, no, I'm gonna have one last little bit of fun before the semester ends, and he waits. And it's 5 past 12, 10 past 12, quarter past 12, and the student suddenly realizes what's happened, hastily finishes up the exam, goes running up to hand it in, and the teacher just leans back and says, what are you doing? And he says, I'm handing in my exam. He says, your exam is late. You flunked the class. I'll see you next semester. The student says, do you know who I am? And the professor says, it doesn't matter who you are. Your exam is late. You flunked the class. I'll see you next semester. But the student holds his ground and says, but do you know who I am? And the teacher gets angry and says, no, I don't know who you are. The student takes his exam, slides it into the middle of the stack, says precisely, and walks out of the room. Now, why does a joke like that work? It works because the punchline sees the situation in a completely different way. That's what makes a joke work. And the task of a joke teller, an art that I think is getting lost because everyone reads their jokes on the internet now. But the task of a joke teller is to tell it not too slow, because you'll start to figure it out, not too fast, because you'll miss it. And so I have to read the audience and I have to lead you this way, and the punchline's over here. In business and sustainability, I'd like you to think about that metaphor as well. Many of you may be wondering, what is a business school professor doing standing in front of you talking about sustainability? And we'll get into that. I'm not here to say that business has all the answers, but I will start with where I start on this issue, that if you want to address issues like climate change, species extinction, income inequality, any number of these issues, business has to solve it. You can challenge that notion, but the market is the most powerful orienting force on earth. Business is the most powerful entity within it. You can lament that fact, but it is a fact. And so if you want to solve these issues, we need to steer the market towards solving them. Business makes the buildings we work and live in, provides the food we eat, the clothes we wear, the forms of mobility we enjoy, the medical system that keeps us healthy. All of these things come from business. And so my work is around the idea of how does business get steered? How does business address these issues so that we can actually solve them? That's the gist of my talk, but it's going to have two pieces to it. One that's optimistic, one slightly less so, but it'll give you a sense of where business is on these issues and how they may go forward. And I am going to do a poll at some point during this class to get a sense of where you stand on the question of the role of business in sustainability in society. Let me start. What do we mean when we talk about sustainability? How many people have heard of Thomas Malthus? Good. How many people haven't? Bad. Okay. How many people didn't answer the question? Why are you answering it now? Okay. Thomas Malthus, 1700s, drew this very simple graph. He said, look, we've got population. That food required is the population graph. Population is growing exponentially. Food produced is growing in a straight line. They will cross and we will starve. Now, Malthus, his prediction didn't come true because he didn't anticipate the advent of industrial agriculture, pesticides, fertilizers, herbicides, increasing the amount of food we can produce on a piece of land so we can feed more and more people. So some people dismiss Malthus. He was wrong. Other people say his idea was right, just the context shifted, and are we just delaying that crossing point? There is sort of the root of the sustainability challenge. To put it in context, I want you to really grasp how fast population is growing. You guys are all young. I am not. I am less so. I was born in 1961. In 1961, there were 3 billion people on Earth. Think about that for a second. It took Homo sapiens about 25,000 years to go from 0 to 3 billion people. Now there are 7.5 billion people. In the course of my short lifetime, it's more than doubled. And if I live to 2050, and I certainly hope to, I will see 10 billion people. Those people need food. They use resources. And it's not just the number, but the number of people who want to actually live a more affluent lifestyle, like the lifestyle we enjoy here in North America. They want that around the world. And so not only growing in numbers, we're growing in our demands on the environment. So the market has to respond to this. And it is responding, but it's responding in a way that's unsustainable. So is Malthus right or wrong? I'll leave that to you to decide. But the issue of sustainability centers around these issues. If we think about sustainability in a more modern context, I'm going to walk you through a very quick history, very fast. You don't have to remember any of it. What I want you to remember is the issue is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And this is important. This is good because people have a short attention span. If it didn't change, people would lose interest. They move on to the next thing. You know how people are. And so because it keeps evolving, it keeps our attention. So we can go back to 1987. The Brundtland Commission came up with a report, Our Common Future, and they came up with a standard definition of sustainable development, meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. There is sort of the textbook definition of sustainability. Embedded within it is development. It's sustainable development. It is continuing to develop, but it's considering the future in our decisions today. And isn't that the root of the issue around climate change? Should we reduce our emissions today at cost to us now for the benefit of future generations? Does the economy take care of that? No, it doesn't. How do we change the economy to take care of it? There's our rub. Over time, starting with that definition, changing scientific knowledge about the nature of environmental issues. When I first started focusing on environmental issues, we had things like aesthetic pollution, thermal pollution, noise pollution. We talked about parts per thousand. Now we talk about parts per trillion. All these things have started to evolve. The political environment changes, it evolves. It's very dynamic right now. And the next presidential election can take us in a fork in the road going in either direction. Public awareness of these issues is at an all-time high right now in a very exciting and interesting way. Our technological development, do we have solutions to these issues? Back up 10 years, there was no talk of solutions, just talk of the problem. and then changes in the corporate posture and approach to dealing with these issues. That's what I focus on. So starting in 1987, we can go to 1997. A guy named John Elkington comes up with this idea of the triple bottom line. Companies shouldn't just focus on economic, they should also focus on the environment or equity. It's called the 3 E's: environment, equity, and economy, or the 3 P's: people, profits, and pollution. It was 1997, you start to have reporting requirements. The Global Reporting Initiative comes out. Companies start to report their performance on sustainability issues. You have the Carbon Disclosure Project in 2000, Dow Jones Sustainability Index in 2008, SASB accounting standards starting to take this stuff into consideration in 2011. In 2015, you have the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals that companies try to abide by to address issues around sustainability in the world around us, things like poverty, women's education, freedom of choice, these kinds of things, trying to normalize a set of standards around the world. Something very interesting happened in 2018. John Elkington, who developed the triple bottom line, disavowed it. He said, this is not what I intended it to be. I didn't want it to be a metric that people chase. I want it to be a mindset for companies to think about more than just money, think about the people on the planet. But instead it's become this metric, so I disavow it. Too late, everyone's still using it. In 2018, ESG emerges, environment, science, social, and governance. And that's where we start to have BlackRock start into the conversation, one of the largest private equity firm in the world. And it's starting to say that they're going to consider environmental and social characteristics when they do their investment decisions. This has created a backlash, particularly from attorney generals in states that rely on the fossil fuel sector. And so they said, we will not allow any of our public money to go into BlackRock. BlackRock, ESG is woke capitalism. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, has to come back and say, this isn't woke capitalism, this is capitalism. Should you invest in coal-fired power plants? No, that is not the future. There's huge risk in that. Considering that risk is important going forward. And this is where we are today. I have never seen so much attention on sustainability within the corporate sector as I'm seeing right now. There are chief sustainability officers. I see more and more positions for my students with sustainability in the title. It's a very exciting, interesting, confused, complex time. Companies are trying to figure this out and they don't know what to do. And that's where this starts to get really interesting and really exciting because the environment is very fluid. And so I want to try and give you some structures to think about it. What's common among all those models is that business is the solution. Market is the solution. This is what I teach in a business school. I don't teach, for example, corporate social responsibility. I hate that term. What I think that term means in my mind is come into my class, I'm going to teach you how to care about the environment and people. Then go into your other classes and maximize NPV, ROI, ROA, all the standard business metrics. If I'm teaching a different value set from everything else, it's not going to work because you have a career to manage. So how do you link these things? How do you make these things work? That's what I focus on. Now, some of you may be sitting here getting a little uncomfortable because you may not like the idea that the market is focusing on these issues. You may see market as a problem. I'm going to ask you in a second to put yourself into one of two camps. You're either dark green. You see the market as the problem. You see business as the enemy, and you'd love to get into a confrontational mode with them. There are groups out there like Greenpeace that do this. Earth First, the Earth Liberation Front. There are all kinds of environmental NGOs that attack companies as the problem. The market is the problem. Business is the problem. I don't like business. Or you could be bright green. You could say the business is solution. The market is the ally. And you want to work in a collaborative mode. I want you to think about that for a second. Are you dark green or bright green? How many people would say they're dark green? Raise your hand. More hands, please. I want to see more hands. We need more dark greens. How many people are bright green? How many people still aren't raising their hand? Okay, good. The important point is not one's right, one's wrong. Each one has a place to play. There's an idea developed by a sociologist named Haynes called the radical flank effect. Forget about the highfalutin academic terms. He was looking at the racial equity movement in the 60s, civil rights. And what he looked at, what he saw was we had Martin Luther King, and he had a message, and it was too radical for mainstream white America to accept until Malcolm X came along and pulled the radical flank way out here. Martin Luther King was all about nonviolent protest. Malcolm X, he had no such qualms, and he was all about whatever means is necessary to get the answer done. When Malcolm X came along, all of a sudden people looked at Martin Luther King and saw him as a moderate. I said, oh, I can now accept what he's saying because I can't accept what Malcolm X is saying. The same is true on the environment. Bill McKibben says we have to call the fossil fuel sector public enemy #1 and put it out of business. Is he going to do this? I don't think so. Is his voice important? Yes, it pulls the flank way out here so other people can start to say, maybe there's an issue with the fossil fuel sector, and people can start to have conversations about, for example, if the fossil fuel sector extracts all the oil that we know exists in their known reserves, we're done. It's that simple. And now you can start to see terms like stranded assets and carbon accounting show up in places like Business Week, the Wall Street Journal, because the radical flank got pulled out way out here. You dark greens, you're the radical flank. We need more radical flank. We need more radical voices to push out here. Don't expect it to be pleasant. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X actually hated each other. They disliked each other very much, but they also saw that they needed each other in order to get what's done. Think of it not just one right way to do this, but we're all part of the same ecology trying to go toward the same direction. The second administrator of the EPA was Russell Train. And at the same time, there was a guy in the environmental movement named David Brower. And he was a real aggressive, in-your-face, very antagonistic guy. He tried to oppose all dams on all national parks. You may not know this, but it's actually a proposal for a dam for the Grand Canyon. And David Brower blocked it. He was the head of the Sierra Club. And Russell Train said something that captures the radical flank effect. He said, thank God for the David Browers of the world. They make the rest of us seem reasonable. That's the radical flank. So the dark greens need to be out there holding the flag saying, this is the pure approach. This is where we need to go so the bright greens can start to get things done. Without the bright greens, the dark greens can't get the job done. Without the dark greens, the bright greens can't get the job done. A lot of environmental NGOs know this. They would never admit this in public, but I know some people in some bright green environmental NGOs that work with companies, finding a company not wanting to talk to them. So what do? They make a phone call to one of the dark green NGOs and say, can you do us a favor? Can you start picketing this company and really make a pain in the ass out of yourself so that they'll call us and we'll help them work through it? It happens. And this is important to understand how this whole piece goes together. So you can be antagonistic, you can attack people in business. Great, go for it. Keep pushing, push hard. If you want to be in business to try and find these solutions, take the slings and arrows, use them as power to get things done. This is where I'm approaching it. This is what I want to get across to you today. So you will leave here thinking about whether you're dark green or bright green. This is important when you think about your career too. I could ask you, you want to go work for Patagonia or ExxonMobil? Interesting question. Patagonia, you'll be surrounded by people who get it. Your impact might be that big. You can go to ExxonMobil. You might be surrounded by people who don't get it. Your impact could be this big, but you have to be able to be ready to fight that fight. You have to be ready to take those slings and arrows. I write about climate change. I write about why people reject the science of climate change. So I have a folder in my inbox for hate mail. I get hate mail for doing this. It's not something I enjoy. It was very hard when I first started, but it's part of the game. It's part of the task of really trying to change how people think. You have to be prepared to think about what's your personality, what's your style. You want to be in Greenpeace throwing rocks? You want to be in the Environmental Defense Fund shaking hands? You choose. Find the place where you fit, where you can make a difference, where you will thrive. What is your style? I have a lot of students that will come to me and say, where can I go in my career to make the biggest difference? And my answer is that is the wrong question. Because if my answer is you should be an accountant at ExxonMobil, Rio Tinto, Weyerhaeuser, the answer may be true, but if you don't want to be an accountant and you don't want to work for a big multinational resource extraction company, you will die. You will not thrive. And you can't do anyone any good if you're not thriving. So you have to find the place where you thrive, and that's your piece within this ecosystem. That's what I'm doing here. So if you think that business is the enemy, listen through. I have students who take my classes, they know where the weak spots are, where the leverage points are in companies to inflict the most pain. Great. And I have students that come to my class because they want to work in those companies, try and leverage from the inside. Figure out where you want to be in the ecology. What I want to do is give you two ways of thinking about how to approach sustainability in business, and then I'll wrap up. One is called enterprise integration, the other is called market transformation. Don't worry about the terms. The first part, I'm going to treat sustainability merely as a market shift. The market is evolving, adapt if you wish, I don't care. The second one, it's around systems change. The first one is what we're doing right now. The second one is where it is going. The first one is where I've devoted most of my career. The second one is where my career is going. The first one will get you a job. The second one will give you a target for where you want to go in the course of your life to deal with these issues. Have I given you enough of a sense of the difference between the two? Let me walk through them. The first one, sustainability is a market shift. It's merely a market shift. You don't need to care about climate change. You don't need to care about the science of climate change. You just need to see that your market is shifting. Adapt if you wish. Here are some market shifts on the slide. You can go from the typewriter to the computer. How many people have heard of Smith Corona? Brother, you've heard of it. IBM. I grew up with this. Those were the three primary typewriter manufacturers in the world. I remember this transition. Two of them saw the market shift in play. One of them did not. Two of them are gone. One of them is still here. IBM saw the shift. The other two did not. They're gone. I remember when Stephen Jobs said, I anticipate a day where there would be a computer in every home. And I and all my friends thought he was insane. Who would want a computer in their home? Because I was picturing a mainframe and punch cards, because that's what a computer was. Can you imagine a home today without a computer? He saw it, I didn't. He saw the market shift in play, I did not. The device down the bottom. How many people have seen that device on the left? How many people have used one? Okay, that's called a Walkman. That was my personal music system when I was your age. And that device on the bottom right, I have to change that picture. That's an iPod. That's a very old iPod. But the point still stands. That device on the right, it's intuitive to you folks. How many people have read a manual on their iPhone or their computer? No, you just use it. It's either a sign of the genius or the evil of Stephen Jobs. I remember being in an Apple store one time and watching a 4-year-old girl walk up to this little table and start playing on the computer. It's wired in. It's part of our psychology. It changes our culture. It changes what we do in the classroom. I can't just teach you facts. You can pull up any fact you want on your computer or on your iPhone. I have to teach you how to be discerning consumers of facts. That changes what we do. It changes our culture in very fundamental ways. It was very funny. NPR did an episode one time where they got this 13-year-old boy. They took away his iPhone. They gave him one of these Walkman. Said, make this your music system for the week. And at the end of the week, they asked him, how did it go? And he said it was difficult because it wasn't until halfway through he realized you had to take the cassette tape out, turn it over, put it back in to hear the other side of the tape. It wasn't obvious to him. How many people have any idea what I just said? Okay, a lot of you don't. I recently got to show my nephew, my 16-year-old nephew, his first rotary dial telephone. I grew up at a rotary dial telephone. And his first question was, how do you reset it? That joke doesn't make any sense for you guys. Tell that one to your parents, they'll laugh. Our culture is shifting. Markets are connected to our culture. Our culture drives market shifts. Our culture is changed by market shifts. They're intertwined, and this is really important. And it's happened throughout history, and it's happening now. So think about it as a market shift. If you do that, 3 questions become important for the business. Who is driving it externally? Is it driven by your consumers? your insurance companies, your banks, your supply chain. I can go down the list. These are all the constituents that matter to a business. You'll notice up there, the environment isn't one of them. These are business constituents. When you ever hear a company saying, we're doing this because it's the right thing, you should immediately think, that was very nice. Now tell me the real reason you're doing it. Because that CEO has to convince people in the company whose profit and loss statement will be affected by this strategy to do this. And if your answer is to do this the right thing, and by the way, your year-end bonus is going to be cut in half because we're doing the right thing, guess what? They're not going to do it. And so you have to make the business case. Who is driving it externally? And then you say, what department inside will handle it? If you imagine corporate communications is responsible for sustainability, or law, or regulatory affairs, responsibly very different. If you are looking at a company to decide whether you want to work for them, and you care about sustainability issues, look where the chief sustainability officer sits. If it's in marketing, guess what? It's a marketing pitch. If it's in operations, guess what? It goes to the strategic core of the company. For a company like Toyota, is the hybrid drivetrain a marketing pitch? No, it's central to their future strategy. That tells you everything right there. So where does it sit? And at the end of the day, what frame best explains the business imperative? Are we doing this for operational efficiency? Are we doing this because we will get better rates with banks, therefore cost of capital? Is it for internal culture because our employees care about this? What is the business case? And it differs by different companies. If you're a Procter & Gamble, they are driven by consumers. They're a consumer goods company. They're driven entirely by consumers. If you don't connect it to consumer demand and do product development, no one in the company will touch it. You could take a look at a company like Walmart. They're all about moving stuff around the country, around the world as cheaply as possible. If you don't connect it to operational efficiency, if you don't connect it to supply chain logistics, no one will touch it. And so this is how you try and think like a company. What gets their attention? There's Sustainability 101. And you can see these market shifts taking place right now. Here are some market shifts in play right now, driven not entirely by sustainability, but in part by sustainability. Device on the upper left. How many people have never touched one of these? Okay, so they're still in play. There are incandescent light bulbs out there. Should you invest in incandescent light bulb companies? No, that technology is over. It is done. Should you invest in compact fluorescent technology? No, that technology is being eclipsed. Should you invest in LED technology? Yes, that's where the market is going. LEDs offer tremendous benefits over the other two. They last longer. You don't have to replace them as much. You use far less energy. And you can do some fun things with them. You can change colors. I'm not sure why, actually, but you can. Philips will sell you an LED light bulb, and you can take out your phone, and you can turn your house blue or red or green, whatever your mood is. Again, I don't know why one would want to do this, but they'll help you do this. Does it allow other possibilities? I don't know if it's happening here in Ithaca. It's happening in Ann Arbor. The city is shifting over to LED streetlights. Why? Because they last longer. You don't have to replace them. The costs of maintaining them are significantly less. They also have a very concentrated beam. You'll know you're under an LED streetlight because it's very precise. That way, your living room or your bedroom in the front of the house is not lit up like a Christmas tree when that streetlight goes on. It just goes straight there where you need it, and it changes everything. It can reduce light pollution in the sky, has a lot of benefits. Other technologies. Should you be buying an SUV? Is that the future? Is it a hybrid? Is it electric? The answer is electric. I'm at the University of Michigan. We're right there next to Detroit. Ask anyone in the auto sector, the future is electric. Now that opens up some interesting possibilities. Amory Lovins from the Rocky Mountain Institute likes to provoke a question. Is an electric car a car that run by batteries and electric motors, or is it a bunch of batteries on wheels? That's a very important question. If it's a battery on wheels, well, he says it is, you can do things like in Japan, if you buy a Nissan Leaf, you can buy a transformer. And when you have a power failure, you plug your house into the car and you run the house off the battery pack. You can do this now. Or Toyota's doing some research right now. If all those cars outside were electric, say a parking garage filled with electric cars, or even better yet, if they're hydrogen fuel cells, those are unutilized capacity. At any point in time, 95% of the car fleet is sitting idle. That's a wasted asset. How can you turn that into something valuable? Well, what if you could plug those batteries into the grid? As we start to go install more wind and more solar in the grid, you know, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. The utility needs battery storage, sometimes for very short periods of time, seconds, minutes. They just need that storage to balance the load in the grid. You can rent them, the batteries in your car, so you're making money off the car sitting there idle in the parking lot because the power company will pay you to use your batteries. There is another example of technology evolving to address a market shift. Next one down, a thermostat on the left, a dumb thermostat. I turn it to a temperature, it stays there, it doesn't move. I adjust it, it goes there, it doesn't move. And then on the right, I have the Nest thermostat. And beyond that, I have something called the GE Eco Dashboard. This is the beginning of the smart home. So for example, how many people have seen a Nest thermostat? Okay, this is a programmable thermostat, nothing new there. It was designed by Apple engineers. You may not know that. It's intuitive, you can figure it out. It also, when I land at Detroit Metro, let me back up, when I leave the house, if I'm gone for a certain period of time, there's a motion sensor. It senses no one's home, and it dials the house down to a temperature that I preset, 60 degrees. I land at the airport, I take out my phone, I open up my Nest thermostat, I turn the temperature back up so I come home to a warm home. Siemens has one that tracks your phone if you let it, and it knows you're going in a direction towards the house. Once you hit a certain distance, it automatically turns the house up, warms it up for you so you come home. The one next to it is the GE Eco Dashboard. GE developed this product. It has to be wired into the home when it's built, but it will give you a real-time display of your energy and water use. So for example, you'll put one in, you'll go on vacation, and you'll see that the house is still drawing power, and you'll start to learn about phantom loads. You learn about how many things in your house are still using power when no one is there. For example, if you have a nice, beautiful 60-inch plasma TV on your wall, you'll learn that that uses more power turned off than a regular TV turns on because you have to keep the plasma warm for the instant on. All those clock radios, all those refrigerators, all those devices, they keep drawing power. And you'll start to think differently about how you use power. You'll start to think about ways to reduce power. Similarly, there's a hot water heater at my house right now creating hot water for someone who's not there. It doesn't need to be that way. There are instant hot water heaters that can do the job. So you may, for example, and it puts in dollars. This is important because people react to dollars. So you may go home to your parents' house for the holidays, and you find out mom and dad installed one of these. And then on Saturday morning, you get up and you take your 2-hour shower that you really like, and you love that heat and that steam, and you come downstairs, and there's mom and dad, and they're pointing at this device and say, that shower just cost $8. Don't do it again. And you're going to connect behavior to outcomes real fast, and it's going to change how we think about energy. When I'm trying to give a sense of where the market is going. I can go down below that. You can have a standard coal-fired power plant. You can move to solar. You can move to wind. Right next to that is a schematic for a train station in Tokyo that creates power from a source that's overlooked every day, and that's the footsteps of the thousands of people that pass through the train station every day. That has impact sensors in the floor, and every step creates electricity. There's a dance club in Stockholm that uses this technology, so if you dance fast, the lights get brighter. If you dance slow, the lights dim down. But that's the key here of a market shift. Are there opportunities that other people can't see than you can see? There's a wonderful line by Edwin Land, who started the Polaroid Corporation. He said, the first step in having having a new idea is to stop having an old idea. This is where you guys come in. As we get older, we get stuck in our old ideas. That's the only way to do things. You guys can come in with fresh ideas and say, hey, there's an opportunity. People didn't see that. That's the beauty of the market solving these problems. What can you find? So for example, the last example down the bottom. On the left, you have a top-loading washing machine. Right next to that, you have a front-loading washing machine. This was a massive shift in American culture. It uses far less energy, but it was really hard to sell these. In fact, manufacturers found that they put on the washer, uses less water, less energy. And what did consumers read? Must not clean so well. And they didn't buy them. Instead, they had to do a lot of work with Lowe's and Home Depot to sell them. They had to work with detergent manufacturers to make special detergents to make them work better. They had to work with Consumer Reports to explain to people how these work. And now they're the mainstream, but you still have a problem. Most people don't, for example, when they buy an appliance, they don't do a net present value calculation. And that's fancy business language to say, what will the cost of this be over its lifetime? And so the price difference between a standard top-loading washer and a front-loading washer is significant. You can go from about $500 up to $1,200, $1,400. Most people look at that upfront cost and balk. But if you look at the cost of water and energy for an average family of four, depending on the price of water and energy, where you are in the country, in California, Southern California, you'll make that price differential back in less than a year. But most people don't do that calculation. So we have to teach people how to do that, and they can start to shift. That was the hard part of bringing this technology into the market. Now the device right next to it, here's a marketing challenge for you. That's a company that has developed a washing machine that doesn't use any water at all. It cleans with nylon beads. How many of you are going to be comfortable putting your dirty, grungy clothes in a machine that uses no water? You're not going to do it. That's going to be a very hard sell, but it does work. And so there's where the market goes. And I'll give you some examples later how it can shift. So this is what we're focusing on. This is the market shift in play, and it affects a lot of industries. Every industry up here is being altered by climate change. Whether it's adaptation, dealing with the response, how do you adapt in a climate that's changing? Mitigation, how do we reduce our carbon footprint? Or opportunity, are there places to exploit what's happening here to make more money? How many people have been to Phoenix in the middle of the summer? Have you ever looked at a construction site in Phoenix in the middle of the summer? Productivity grinds to a halt. They have to move it into the evening. Concrete cures far too quickly. They have to use special chemicals. It changes everything. How does the construction industry adapt to this? If you have any business that relies on the environment, climate change is changing it. Whether you're growing crops in the Midwest, where you're drawing water for your bottled water or beverages, you name it. If your Napa Valley is changing because of climate change, they can't grow the same varietals they used to grow. They're growing different varietals. They're seeing pests they never saw before. I actually play a game. It's a personal project of mine, but whenever I meet someone who makes money off the environment, a farmer or something like that, I say, do you see climate change? And I get one of two answers. One, absolutely. I'm seeing it every year. What I do, even major corporations, Cargill, ADM, yes, we're seeing it. The other question, the other answer I get, I'm not ready to use that word climate change. That's liberal left-leaning agenda stuff, but something's going on here and I've never seen it before. I don't know what it is. Either one is fine with me. People are seeing that something's changing, something's different. It's becoming part of our culture. It's becoming part of our lexicon. Of all those up there, the most important one is insurance. Insurance is the canary in the coal mine. Insurance is monetizing the cost of climate change. Some of you may not have bought your first house or your first car. You're going to learn very quickly, you can't do it without insurance. You can't build a building without insurance. The economy grinds to a halt without insurance. And insurance companies are starting to look at climate change and starting to price their risks based on climate change. You want to rebuild your home after the California wildfires? Good luck. You're not going to be able to find insurance. If you do, it's going to be more expensive with far less coverage. You want to have that coastal home in North Carolina or Florida? Good luck. The federal government has even pulled out of covering that kind of insurance, and the insurance companies have pulled out as well. So insurance companies are going to drive the market shift very, very quickly because they monetize it. And so there's the market shift. There's the first way of thinking about this. You don't need to care about climate change. You don't need to know about climate science. Your market is shifting. Adapt if you wish. I had one time, I gave a talk on this, and there was a guy, it was very funny. It was a business group, and they, let's say they weren't excited about hearing about climate change. And there was a table in front, and this guy came in at the beginning of it, and he slapped a book on the table, really loud for effect. And it was facing me. It was called The Climate Hoax. So I kind of knew where his questions were going to go in the middle of my talk. And in the middle of my talk, he interrupted very rudely. He said, this is all, you can fill in the sentence, this is all BS, because climate change is a hoax. And I said, I don't care. Adapt if you wish. The market is shifting. Your consumers care about it. Governments care about it. Your supply chain cares about it. It's up to you. I really don't care. What could he say? There was my answer. Now, there's part one. You all look like you're all at Cornell. You're very smart people. So I'm going to ask you to keep this in mind from S. Scott Fitzgerald. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. So everything I told you works. Everything I told you is the extent to which companies are addressing climate change. The market is shifting, but it is not changing. Everything I've told you will slow the velocity at which we're running into a brick wall, but it will not reverse direction. It will not solve the problem. So keep in mind everything I told you. That's 101. That'll get you a job. You walk into a company and say, I can help you make more money by addressing climate change. Please tell us how. I want to hear it. Now you're talking our language. Where I'm going now is saying, where do we need to go next? And so it's sort of the next phase of business sustainability. That's what I want to focus on. At the center of it is the problem that capitalism right now is in crisis. It's got a problem. It is causing problems. It's causing the problem of climate change. I would also add income inequality is reaching levels that are quite scary. This isn't just Andy Hoffman speaking, and this isn't people outside the market. This is people inside the market. Joseph Stiglitz, a Nobel laureate in economics, says capitalism needs to be saved from itself. Paul Pullman, the former CEO of Unilever, says that capitalism is a damaged ideology that needs to be reinvented for the 21st century. And I want you to hang on that word reinvented. I'm not here to make a pitch for socialism. I'm not here to make a pitch for throwing out capitalism. I'm here to make a pitch to say capitalism is broken and it needs to be fixed. This is one of the few times in my life where I will quote and agree with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson said, capitalism is a tool, like a staple gun or a toaster. If it's broken, fix it or get another one. And that's what I'm here to talk about. That is the next phase of sustainability. At the root of it, climate change is not an environmental problem. Climate change is a systems breakdown. To fix a systems breakdown, you have to fix the system that's causing it. What's causing it? Is capitalism. So on the right, Naomi Klein has a book, Capitalism versus the Climate. Right next to it is a book called Anthropocene or Capitalocene. How many people have heard of the Anthropocene? Good. If you haven't been paying attention. Climate change is just one marker of what scientists have called the Anthropocene, the age of humans. I told you we're growing in numbers. We're growing in such numbers and our technology has such power, we can now alter the global climate. That is a place human beings have never been before. And is a place we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to fix it. They identify 9 planetary boundaries, boundaries beyond which we should not go if we want to maintain a safe operating system for humans and other life forms. Climate change is just one of them. Another one that has them just as alarmed is species extinction. We're in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, where as many as 50% of the species today could be gone by 2100. And that's not just losing cute critters. It changes the ecosystem. It changes the biome. It changes the environment in which we depend. Also in there is fresh water. We're running out of fresh water. There have been cities that almost ran out of water, Cape Town, Sao Paulo. Think about that for a second. Picture Manhattan. You can lose power. You're going to have a spike in the birth rate in about 9 months. You can still survive. Sewers can back up. You can still survive. You run out of water, you have to leave. That is how important water is. And even in the Midwest, the water tables are being drawn down. This is a great concern. And so water availability, ocean acidification, we're acidifying the ocean. I can go through the whole list. Nitrogen, we're dumping nitrogen into farms. It dumps into rivers, causes algae blooms in the Great Lakes, feeds into the Mississippi River. The mouth of the Mississippi River is one big dead zone. Things can't live there because there's too much nitrogen. This is what we're doing to the environment. This is the Anthropocene. Climate change is just one marker. How do we live with this? How do we adapt to it? To give you an example that may be more close to home. I was talking one time with a research chemist from Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. And we were talking about this, about our presence in the environment. And he said, very matter-of-factly, he said, Andy, you know there are measurable levels of ibuprofen in the Mediterranean Sea? And I was stunned, both with the statement and how casual he was about it. And he said, that doesn't concern us. Ibuprofen is a fairly benign compound. What does concern us are antidepressants and birth control pills. You take a drug, it enters your body may not even use it. It may just, its presence does the trick, out it goes, into the sewage treatment plant. It can't handle those complex chemicals. It gets dumped into the aquatic ecosystem. It changes the flora and the fauna. Scientists are finding weird birth defects near outfall pipes from sewage treatment plants from the chemicals that are coming out, and the endocrine disruptors in plastics, all kinds of things. I heard it calculated recently that every one of you has eaten a credit card's worth of plastic in the last week. Every week, this is how much plastic we eat because it's in the foods and it's affecting our bodies. And it affects the foods that we eat. 2 years ago, scientists were studying salmon in Puget Sound. Guess what they found in the salmon? They found Prozac. They found 50 prescription drugs. They even found cocaine because it comes out of the treatment plant, enters the aquatic ecosystem, gets into our food, and comes back on our plate. This is what Rachel Carson warned about when she wrote Silent Spring in the 1960s, that to think that we're separate from the environment is foolishness. We are part of the environment. What we do to the environment, we do to ourselves. That's the Anthropocene. Now, 2 weeks ago, the scientific agencies announced that they're not going to call the Anthropocene a new epoch. So that got rejected. They're saying it should be an event because epochs take 10,000 years and this one's only been around for 50 years. They said it began around 1950 with what they call the Great Acceleration, but they need a golden spike. When did it start? Where's the marker? And so they chose 1950. That's when radioactive isotopes got sprinkled all over the earth. But if you want to look at the Anthropocene another way to think about it, let's imagine humans all die today. We're gone. And 1,000 years from now, some future archaeologists start digging. They will hit a layer. It'll be a very thin layer, but they will say something happened here. Humans happened here. What would they find? They'll find the radioactive isotopes. They'll find a lot of particulates. They'll find plastic. A lot of people said it could be called a plasticine because of the amount of plastic that will be left behind. But there's our marker. That's what we're leaving behind. It's estimated that by 2030, I think, no, 2050, I think, 2030 or 2050, you can look it up. There'll be more plastic in the ocean by weight than fish. This is what we're doing to the environment around us. And so what does this mean? Where do we go from here? I was going to add also, inequality is another systemic problem for capitalism that we can't handle. You can look in the upper left. The red line is the amount of wealth that's owned by the top 1%, and the blue is the amount of wealth owned by the bottom 50%, and you can see money is concentrating in the upper strata of the economy. We have income inequality in this country that we have not seen since the Great Depression, since the Gilded Age. And that is a cause for concern, not just because of the concentration of wealth, but because wealthy people have a disproportionate influence on the political process. And if they don't know how people live, how will they influence political process to serve everybody? My favorite example of that, David Geffen, a very, very wealthy music tycoon, during COVID, put on Instagram a picture, and he said, "This is where I'm quarantining for COVID. I hope everyone's safe." And the picture was his $450 million yacht parked in the Caribbean. And he got justifiably eviscerated for this, and he pulled it down. It was very Marie Antoinette. He couldn't see it coming. He could not see that people might find that offensive. He lived in a different world, and this is the danger. And this is happening all around the world. In 2019, the 26 richest people in the world had more assets than the poorest half of the world's population, 3.8 billion people. By 2021, those 26 people have more money than the US Treasury. This is the concentration of wealth that is quite alarming. And it happens by gender. Women make about 82 cents on the dollar than men. And it happens by race. Blacks and Hispanics don't do as well in this economy as whites and Asians do. And so how do we deal with these issues? This is part of the systemic problem that capitalism facing. So this quote by Stephen Jay Gould, a famous anthropologist from Harvard, captures it for me. He says, "We have become, by the power of a glorious evolutionary accident called intelligence, the stewards of life's continuity on Earth. We did not ask for this role, but we cannot abjure it. We may not be suited to it, but here we are. We have stumbled into this. We don't know how we got here, and we have to figure our way out of it." And I'm sorry, but the Tesla's a great car, but the answer is not another car. If you've gone to China and see the traffic problems, tell me another car is the answer. I don't care what drivetrain's under the hood. 2 years ago, China had a 10-day traffic jam, 10 days. We have to rethink mobility. The electric car is still just another car. And it actually concerns me the amount of money we're putting into developing a new charging network around the country. We're going to try and recreate the gas station network with electric charging stations so we keep driving our cars just as we always have. We have to rethink mobility. Your generation is changing on this. Quick poll, I'm curious. Well, this may not work as much here. If we were in New York City, it would be different. I can ask my students, how many people don't have a license? How many people hope never to have a license? Okay. I can tell you when I was growing up, no hands would have ever gone up. I got a license the first day I could. I got the car the first day I did. It's part of my identity. I actually love cars. I actually have a couple of classic cars. I tell my students that. They look at me like I've got 3 heads. How could you like a car? It's a piece of steel on rubber that sucks money out of my wallet and gets me from point A to point B. What is the love about a car? There's the culture shift. Companies are flummoxed by this. They're flummoxed by your generation. Ford is pulled out of the sedan market, and it's your fault because they don't know what you guys, they don't know how to read you guys. They don't know how to figure out. And that's where this starts to get fun in my mind. So how do we think about systems change to deal with climate change, to deal with sustainability? First of all, we have to shift our mindset from reducing unsustainability to creating sustainability. It's a very different way of thinking about it. Reduce unsustainability, do less bad. Create sustainability, do good. Very different way of approaching it. Electric car, reduce unsustainability. Rethink mobility, rethink multimodal mobility, rethink public transportation, walk more. Now we're talking about creating sustainability. It's a fundamental shift. Put a different metaphor on it. We can stop a war. We stopped the war in Iraq. That's very different than creating peace. Very different. That is a fundamental different way of thinking about the challenge before us. So how do we create sustainability? We have to rethink capitalism. We have to reimagine how capitalism works. What do we keep? What do we amend? What do we throw out? Can private property be unlimited in a capitalist system where global environmental problems are the norm? I see a problem there. Again, if the oil industry extracts all the oil that they own, we will not have a safe environment for the rest of us. If you own an old growth forest and you choose to cut it down, you are destroying a very precious ecosystem under the ground that we actually don't even fully understand yet. What is lost in the process? Should you be able to do that? Probably not. How do we work that into our capitalist system? How do we think about the role of government in the system? All these things. We need to teach students to think more about what is capitalism, how does it work, where has it gone astray, how can we fix it? How do we rethink the purpose of the firm? I could walk up to any of you and say, finish this sentence. The purpose of the firm is to, and I'm willing to bet all of you will say, make money for the shareholder. It is not. It's not in corporate law. There's no law that says companies have to make money for the shareholder. It's a recommendation. Your shareholders might like you to do that, but it can also destroy companies. And groups are starting to come out and say, we have to rethink the purpose of the firm. BlackRock, Business Roundtable, the World Economic Forum, have all started to come forward and say, it can't be just about the shareholder. That leads companies to think of a very short-term focus, only about money. They don't care about the product. If you're following what's happening at Boeing right now, Boeing is in free fall right now. Why? Because they shifted their focus from quality, safety, innovation to share price. They jacked the share price because that's what they were taught to do in business school. That's what markets are supposed to do. And so, for example, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but you can increase the share price of a company, and companies do this by buying back shares. There are shares out there. I am Boeing. I will buy your shares from you. That raises the price because it's now demand and the supply is shrinking. Price starts to go up. And so they jacked the share price of Boeing between 2014 and 2018 by diverting 92% of its operating budget to share buybacks, 92%. And because of that, planes crash, they're poorly designed, doors fall out of the outside, quality is dropping. If you caught it, if you haven't, John Oliver just did an episode on this. Look up John Oliver and Boeing. And people inside the company that were building those planes knew there was a problem. Someone stuck in a tape recorder asking people on the assembly line, would you fly on one of these? And one after the other saying, I wouldn't go near one of these. I won't get in one of these. And the last one actually says, I might fly in one, but I have a death wish. It's actually on the tape. You can actually now go into kayak and say, I'd like a flight and I will not fly on a 737 MAX. You can do this. This is what share price focus can do to a company. The purpose is much more than that. Peter Drucker from the 50s said the purpose of the corporation is to identify and serve a market. Give the market what it wants and then the profits will come. And at the end of the day, the value of a company is how much it provides to society. And we need to bring that back. How do we rethink the role of government in the market? How do we rethink the role of business in policy making? Right now, we're in this mode where government can do no good, keep government out of the way, let the market do its magic. There is no magic in the market. The market is designed to do something. It's designed right now to make rich people richer and poor people poorer and to destroy the environment. It is. How do we fix that? How do we change that? You need to bring government in. We're not going to deal with climate change without regulations that shift the entire market in the right direction. And then there is a role for government in policy making. What can that be? How can we do that properly? How do we rethink material use? We can start to think about circular economy. Nothing should go in the garbage. Nothing should go in the landfill. How do we keep reusing stuff so it stays circular? How do we make sure that the materials you use end up back in a supply chain, gets reused, turned into something else, and keeps on going? How do we decouple? How do we keep growing the economy without using more energy and more materials? There's a Gordian knot. There's a question. How do we do that? How do we go carbon neutral? How do we go carbon negative? These are interesting questions that think about materials. How do we rethink consumption? Is there such thing as sustainable consumption? That's a really interesting question. I don't know the answer. But if we don't figure that out, I don't know how we're going to get there. How do we change our consumption patterns? Do you need to go to fast fashion? Do you have to have a different t-shirt every day? How can you think differently about the stuff you buy? Patagonia has been trying to get people to do this. Don't just buy something that'll wear out tomorrow. Get something that you'll own for its entire lifetime, that you may actually pass on to your kids and they on to their grandkids. That's a totally different mindset. Make something last. There are laws to help you do that. There's a whole right to repair movement. You may not know this, but a lot of products you buy are purposely designed so you can't fix them. I'm willing to bet you can't fix your iPhone. That's by design. You can't fix your computer. Some of you may. It's by design. You're a farmer. You can't fix your combine. It's by design. And there are laws being proposed that the companies have to provide the technical materials, so if you want to fix your own stuff, you can. That kills the idea of planned obsolescence. It allows you to make things last longer. Can we actually degrow the economy? It's a really interesting question, because at the end of the day, you can't have an economy that continuously grows. It's just physically impossible. So how do we rethink that? Can we have steady state economies? These are interesting, difficult challenges. How do we think about metrics? Discounting, sacrosanct in business. $1 tomorrow is worth less than $1 today. Yes. Is that true all the time? That can lead us into some troubling areas. So Nicholas Stern, an economist, calculated the cost of climate change, and he used a ridiculously low discount rate. An economist hammered him, and he said, look, there are times when discounts are inherently immoral. A standard discount rate, 10%, means that every year you buy something for $100, next year it's worth 90, the year after that it's worth 80, the year after it's worth 70, and guess what? After 10 years, it's worth 0. In fact, with a discount rate of 10%, everything 10 years out and beyond is worthless in our economic calculations. Is that true? No, it's not. It's called your future, and it has value. Yet our economic calculations and discounting lead us in the wrong direction. Gross domestic product. Gross domestic product, the measure of economic health of an economy. Is it good? No, not always. It only measures the movement of money. Any money moves, it's good. Are all movements of money good? No. Let me give you an example, a personal example. I might choose to live a lifestyle where I start every day, breakfast at Krispy Kreme donuts, lunch at McDonald's, I'll finish off my day at Burger King, and I'll do this every day. And GDP will go up. And then I have a heart attack and I go to the hospital. GDP goes up. And then I die and my family has a funeral for me, and GDP goes up yet again. Are all those good? No. Does GDP care? No. And so there's a really nice report done by Joseph Stiglitz and Amartya Sen. The president of France asked him to do this. Where does GDP steer us in the wrong direction? It doesn't capture things like, what are we leaving for future generations in terms of a healthy environment? GDP doesn't care. What if you get married and one of you chooses to stay home and raise the kids? GDP actually doesn't like that because now you're not producing money. And so now that's no good. That's a negative on GDP. But does that lead to good economic health or good social health? Yes. Right now, the United States economy has the largest GDP in the world. Number one, woohoo, number one. In terms of income inequality, what's measured by something called the Gini coefficient, we're number 114. We are making a lot of money. We are not sharing it. In terms of certain sustainability indexes, we are not doing that well. Angus Deaton wrote a very famous book called Deaths of Despair. We may have the biggest GDP. We also have the highest suicide rate, the highest drug addiction problem, highest obesity, all of these because of an economy that doesn't care where the money goes as long as it moves. So system change is what we need to focus on. We need to rethink certain things. It's happening right now. We are in the midst of a massive shift, and you don't know it. We're in the midst of a shift that is akin, to my mind, like the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment took 100 years. Prior to the Enlightenment, we didn't understand nature. Nature was animated by mystical forces. We tried to understand it through religion. Then the Enlightenment comes along, and we start to treat nature like a machine. We can take it apart. We can tinker with the parts. We can put it back together, and it will be just fine. And we're starting to realize that doesn't work. The Enlightenment took 100 years, and most people didn't know it was happening until it was over. We're in the middle of a shift right now, and most people don't know it's happening, and you're going to come out someplace 100 years from now, and it's going to be so radically different, you're not going to be able to recognize it. What are some signs? Well, right now, the sharing economy is really starting to take off. You guys take it for granted. I remember the first time I heard about couch surfing, I was like, you're out of your mind. I'm not living in someone else's house. I'm not going to let someone else drive my car. I'm not going to let someone live in my house. And now the sharing economy is quite common. It's a vibrant industry. It has some problems with it, coming with it. Patagonia is trying to get you to think differently about used rather than new. There's a whole different sensibility about how we use stuff. And do you need to actually own the stuff to get the services it provides? No, you don't. Do you need to own a car to get around? No, you don't. Uber and Lyft are there, Zipcar is there, Maven is there. There are ways to get cars even if you don't own one. One of the first companies to come up with that idea was Interface. They came up with a replaceable carpet tiles. I see them down here on the floor. This is a sustainability product. They actually had an idea of an evergreen lease. Do you want to own this carpet? No. Do you want the carpet under your foot? Yes. Lease them. That means I, as the manufacturer, am responsible for making sure this carpet stays nice. Now I'm going to make it carpet tiles because if I need to replace that section, I don't want to replace the whole carpet. I'm going to pull the tiles out, put them back. I've replaced 3 tiles rather than a whole carpet. Why? Because I'm now responsible as the manufacturer rather than you as the buyer. Changes everything. Are we ready to change how we eat? Plant-based foods are starting to grow. Vegetable-based options are starting to grow, whether it's Impossible Burgers or just a vegetarian lifestyle. And how many of you are ready to start to move towards insect-based proteins? How many people have eaten insects? Anyone? Okay. Would you do it again? Okay. If I had your parents in this room, how many think would raise their hand? Your parents would. You got? Oh, okay. But my generation, that picture on the right, I almost didn't put it up. I almost was going to give you a trigger warning, but maybe your generation is a little more comfortable with this, but it's already happening. There's money moving into cricket farming. Mostly create insect-based powders that will go into foods. They'll give you the protein. There's a glimpse into the future. And in the automobile sector, it's radically changing. I just think it's jaw-dropping. If you backed up 15 years and said, would anyone enter the auto sector, I'd say you're out of your mind. No one's going to do it. It's too expensive. Tesla now entered the auto market, and look at their market capitalization. $447 billion compared to General Motors at $51 billion. That is just totally unpredictable, totally bizarre, but that is a sign that the market is shifting. And then right behind it are driverless cars. Do you have them here in Ithaca, driverless cars? They're all over Ann Arbor. How many of you would get into a driverless car? Not many. I'm surprised. Your generation is usually a little more risk-prone in this category. It's a shift, and it's going to happen. If you don't believe that, go back and start reading about, for example, the introduction of driverless elevators. People were terrified to get into an elevator that didn't have someone on the side operating the elevator. Now you take it for granted. You can actually find videos on YouTube of the first introduction of escalators. People were terrified of escalators. You had to have people at the beginning helping people on, at the top, helping them off. And now you take them for granted. This shift is in play, and it's going to happen. And this is what's going forward. So the system change is underway. You are in the middle of it. And so I want to offer you this closing thought. And it is this. This is my grandparents. These are my grandparents, were my grandparents. And my grandmother was born in 1899 and she died in 1995. I remember her funeral vividly because I stood there thinking about all she saw in her lifetime. She saw the advent of indoor plumbing. She was born into a house without plumbing. She saw the advent of indoor electrification. She was born into a house that was lit by oil. She saw the first car. She saw man land on the moon. She saw all that and more. If I told her when she was your age, the world she would die in, she would have said, "You're crazy. That's never going to happen." If I possibly had a crystal ball to show you the world you would die in, you would say, "That's crazy. That's never going to happen." And I think the pace of change is accelerating. So the world you would die in is going to be so different than the world today that your kids or grandkids will go to your funeral and say, "Wow, all they saw in their lifetime." Now, the point of this is not to try and predict the future. The point of this is trying to get you to think about what role do you want to have in making it the world you want it to be. There's the challenge. You're at the beginning of your life. You're getting a great education. You can go in any direction you want. If these issues matter to you, whether it's sustainability or equality, economic equality, gender equality, racial equality, whether it's access to healthcare, I don't care what it is, what kind of a world do you want your kids to grow up in? And what role do you want to have in making it so? I'll stop it there. Thank you. So I think there's time for Q&A if you have any questions.
Hi, I
Hi.
have a quick question. I noticed you said earlier you're talking about like the future of cars and like even though we're creating more electric cars, it's not necessarily solving the problem. In like your opinion, what do you think the future of transportation like, should be to achieve that goal?
Well, if my crystal ball is as good as yours, pretty worthless. But if I were to bet, if we were going to project out 50, 60 years, those cars won't be out there. Those parking lots won't be out there. When you are done with this class, you want to go someplace, you're going to pull up a car on your phone and it will come and get you, and it may be driverless. Auto companies are already moving in this direction, and that changes everything for what a car company is. It's not a hardware company. It now becomes a software company. It needs to be able to predict demand. You know, when is demand going to be the highest? Because you 50 years from now are going to look on your phone. You're going to get really impatient if that car takes too long to get there. And so the car companies are going to be competing to get a car there as fast as possible. And so I would think that's going to change. I think how this building is powered is going to be radically altered. The grid's going to look totally different. Whether it's large baseload power plants, I doubt it. I think there's going to be a lot of microgrids, a lot of localized energy manufacturing, energy production. And then more use of public transportation that actually serves our needs and multimodal. The idea that I can land at LaGuardia and have to take a taxi into Manhattan is insane. But I should get off at LaGuardia, get on a train. How many people have been to Zurich? You land in Zurich, you go downstairs, you're on a train. You're on a great train. Off to where you want to go. You get off in St. Gallen, there's a car there or a bike or you're walking. And so you can map out your route from point A to point B without owning a car in a very pleasant and efficient way. There's my picture.
Oh, thank you, Professor, for today's really wonderful lecture to us. My question is a bit similar, but probably at a higher level. I wonder, like, how can we see the trend? Like, how can we see the society changing? It can be a really general question, but also I wonder, like, what we would say about like how politics is influencing this part, because I totally understand that there's so many different governmental systems around the world. Even like US in general is like pretty much like democratic in some ways, but certainly different system may have different impacts. And how can we see the trend from that?
You know, that's a very interesting question because companies struggle with this all the time. Some people can see very subtle distant signals and some people can't see it right in front of their faces. There are wonderful quotes over history of great famous people who couldn't see the future and it was happening right in front of them. There's a wonderful quote from the CEO of Warner Brothers. just as talking movies were about to come out and said, who the hell wants to hear actors talk? Now, what was blinding him? He didn't want to pay actors more money for speaking. He liked silent pictures. He had control. There's a wonderful quote from the CEO of Decca Records when they were turning down the Beatles, said, their time has passed. No one likes their music. Tom Watson, the famed CEO of IBM, said, I picture a future of maybe 10 computers. You're seeing mainframes. So some people can see distant signals. Steve Jobs saw distant signals in a very subtle way. Some people occupy places where they can facilitate and hasten the change. You can see them too. It's in the culture. What do you see in your friends? Are your friends more comfortable getting into driverless cars? Do your friends want to own a car? Do they think a car is a stupid financial albatross? This is a culture shift that a lot of people are paid a lot of money to try and figure out what's in your head, what's in your demographics head, so we can sell you whatever you want. And so there's a whole industry trying to figure that out. At the root of it, technology is, to my mind, just the vehicle for culture shift. And so when culture changes, now you know it's stuck. And they're intertwined. The printing press and the Reformation, intimately tied. Before the printing press, no one could read the Bible except clerics. After the printing press, they could. The birth control pill and the sexual revolution, the cotton gin and the Civil War, these are all intertwined. And the culture starts to shift. Certainly politics play into it. What is the future of American capitalism? I think it has to shift or it's gonna have a serious problem. And there are other models out there. Nordic capitalism is a fascinating model that actually has a vibrant capitalist economy and a huge safety net, free education, free healthcare, free childcare. You call it free, but you're paying for it with high taxes. And so can we get there? I don't know. If we don't get there, will we die under our weight? That I don't know either. So the future is very unpredictable.
I think that earlier you talked about this sort of corporate cultural focus on like shareholder value. What do you think caused that shift towards shareholders in the first place, and what do you think we can do to get out of that sort of culture that we see with companies like Boeing?
Yeah. What got us into it? We had the Great Depression in the 1930s. John Maynard Keynes, an economist in England, develops macroeconomics, Keynesian economics, where the government can actually manage the market, can actually guide it. And business and government work very closely together in this country, in the United States. We had a tremendous advantage because after World War II, the rest of the world was destroyed and they had to rebuild, and we were the only economy standing. So we were basically unmatched. Over time, those economies rebuilt themselves, often with better technology than we had because they started from scratch and competition grew. And so in the 70s, American corporations were not doing as well. And people were scrambling to figure out why. And so Milton Friedman, the Chicago School, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, government is bad, get government out of the way, neoclassical economics all emerged in the 1970s. It emerged in response to a problem, but now it's creating other problems. And so what will get us out of it? It's already starting to happen. You're looking for changes. You've heard a lot of talk about the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act. This is the government now starting to get involved in what's called industrial policy, where the government is now trying to steer the market again. It's not going back to Keynesian, but it's going to something different where business and government is working together. And that's one piece of it. And I think just as people start to recognize there's a problem, your generation is fascinating to me because I've been teaching on college campuses for 30 years. You want to talk about culture change? I've been teaching on college campuses for 30 years and they've been politically dead, silent. No one complained about anything. Now they're alive on climate change and inequality. Are students strident? Yes. Are they sometimes annoying? Yes. Do I like this? Absolutely. This is your world and your generation is starting to say, this is my world and I want to have a say in what it's going to be. Your generation voted in this election like young people have not voted in decades. That's exciting to me. Politicians ignore your generation because you don't vote. They're suddenly waking up going, holy shit, what do they want? I have no idea. But we have to figure out how to appeal to them to get their votes. So that's happening. So it's all part of a broad cultural shift. Lots of levers. I don't know which one's going to work. All of them will work. or none of them will work.
I think
Okay.
we're at time.
Okay.